Pharaoh was the king of Egypt, a powerful and cruel king. He had forgotten all that Joseph had done. Pharaoh owned the entire nation of Israel as his slaves. When he was afraid that the Israelites were becoming too many, he ordered the death of every baby boy born to any Israelite woman. One family had a sweet baby boy whom they named Moses. They were not going to let Pharaoh kill their child, so they made a basket and placed their son into it. Then they gently lowered him into the river. Baby Moses floated down the river in the basket. It just so happened that the basket floated down the river right to the spot where Pharaoh's daughter was taking a bath. She took the basket and peeked inside. It was a baby. She was shocked but delighted. She wanted to keep the baby as her own. And since Moses' sister was watching the whole event, she offered to get Moses' real mother to take care of the baby. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. He saw how hard the Israelites worked and how badly the Egyptians treated them. His own countrymen were suffering at the hands of these cruel slave drivers. One day, Moses saw a mean Egyptian beating an Israelite. This was more than Moses could handle. He stood up, rushed to the Egyptian, and killed him. Moses had avenged his fellow Israelite, but he had also broken the law. When Pharaoh learned of this, he wanted to kill Moses, so Moses ran away as far as he could. He was no longer a prince, and his fellow Israelites were still in captivity. Moses went into the desert, where he met a group of people who welcomed him. There in the desert, Moses took up his residence. He got married, raised sheep, and passed many years of his life. All the while, God was preparing Moses for a most important task. One day, while he was taking care of his flock, Moses saw a strange sight. There, in the middle of the desert, was a bush on fire. This was quite a sight, so Moses came closer to investigate. Then God spoke to Moses from the burning bush. He told Moses to go back to Egypt, along with his brother Aaron, to help rescue the Israelites. God was going to perform many miraculous signs. Moses was afraid of what would happen to him, but he had to obey God. He went with his brother Aaron, and they went straight to the new Pharaoh. "Let my people go," Moses said. Obviously, Pharaoh wasn't going to let his entire slave population just leave. Pharaoh refused. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. This was an opportunity to see God's hand at work. God was going to punish Pharaoh and show the Egyptians many signs and wonders. God then told Moses to touch the water of the Nile River, and immediately it turned into blood. Soon all the water in Egypt turned into blood. Pharaoh's magicians said they could do that trick as well, and so Pharaoh was not impressed and still refused to let the Israelites go. Again, Moses pleaded with Pharaoh, but God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he refused to let the Israelites go. Then God sent a plague of frogs that covered the land. Still, Pharaoh refused. Again, Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh and demanded that he let the Israelites go to worship God. Again, Pharaoh refused. This time, God did an even bigger sign to punish stubborn Pharaoh. God sent gnats. They covered Egypt, but not the area where the Israelites lived. This was horrible. Still, Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. Every time Pharaoh refused, God's punishment became worse. This time, God sent a swarm of flies that covered the land. The Egyptians were in misery. Then God punished Egypt by killing their animals. Not even this made Pharaoh repent. His heart was as stubborn as ever. God's punishment grew more intense and more severe. Again, Moses came before Pharaoh, but nothing changed. Even when painful sores were sent on all the Egyptians and their animals, this did not change Pharaoh's heart. Then God sent hail, the worst hailstorm the land had ever seen. Moses warned the people to take cover, but many did not listen, and they, along with their animals, were killed by this fierce storm. Still, Pharaoh refused. Then God sent a plague of locusts to cover the entire land. It was horrible, but not enough to make Pharaoh change his mind. Then came God's final punishment, worse than any of the other plagues. This time, God was going to take the life of all the Egyptian firstborn, human and animal. God told the Israelites to take a lamb, slaughter it, and paint some of its blood on the doorposts of their houses. That night, when the angel of the Lord would pass by their house and see the blood, it would spare their firstborn. Any house that did not have this marking would lose their firstborn. And so it happened. That night the angel of the Lord came, and all the firstborn of Egypt died. There was loud weeping and crying everywhere. Even Pharaoh's son was dead. The Egyptians became very afraid of the Israelites because God was on their side. Finally, it happened. Pharaoh told the Israelites to leave. During Passover, the Israelites ate their supper standing up, picked up their bags, and walked away from Egypt, never to return.